They believed they had discovered an easy victim when 5 infamous bikers approached a single woman at Riverside Diner. But instead, they crossed paths with a command recon Marine captain who would alter the course of history for an entire town. Millions of people would watch what transpired that night on the internet. Raise awareness among veterans and demonstrate that our country faces its toughest fights not abroad, but at home. Alright, let's begin. First things first, tell us in the comments from where you're watching. Be sure to subscribe if you loved today's story because tomorrow's will be even more amazing. At her regular corner seat in Riverside Diner, Hannah Dawson savored the peaceful evening ambience as she sipped her coffee. Her denim jacket, which bore the sole visible emblem of her 3 tours in Afghanistan, a tiny purple heart pin, glistened in the dwindling sunshine as seen through the window. Though her easy posture didn't indicate anything special, her athletic figure exuded the serene confidence of someone who had witnessed more combat than most, even though she was 35 years old and enjoying a pleasant supper with her family. In her customary manner, Betty refilled her coffee cup and offered Hannah another. The seasoned waiter had become rather fond to her reserved regular patron during her 20-plus years of service at Riverside. Tell me how the Veterans Center is doing. Betty, we are making progress. Today, I began computer training with 3 new veterans. It's encouraging to witness their successful return. Well done, my darling. Even after all this time, I can't believe you completely omitted the fact that you were a captain in the Marine Corps. It is best to keep some things under wraps. Plus, I've moved past that phase of my life. With the swing of the door, the diner's bell rung. The typical evening scene of weary employees and their families was replaced by 5 macho members of the Iron Vipers motorbike gang. They were led by a massive man named Blade, who had the arrogant self-assurance of someone accustomed to frighten people, and their leather wounds showed signs of difficulty. Oh, my goodness, what have we got here? The diner was echoed by Blade's voice. Our search has led us to what appears to be a really welcoming location. With her strategic mind constantly analyzing the scenario, Hannah observed their reflection in the window. Blade stood about 6 feet 2 inches, probably 240 pounds. His second in command, a wiry man with a snake tattoo crawling up his neck, kept his right hand near his vest pocket. The other 3 spread out across the diner, their boots heavy on the linoleum floor. Hey, sweetheart, one of the bikers called out to a young waitress, deliberately knocking over a glass of water. Looks like you got a mess to clean up. The waitress, barely 20, kept her eyes down as she gathered plates with trembling hands. A mother with 2 small children at a nearby booth began quietly gathering her things, trying not to draw attention. What's wrong with the kid? Blade laughed, turning toward the sound of a child's whimper. Maybe mama needs some company to cheer her up. The lady and her children are leaving. Step aside. Hannah's voice cut through the tension, calm and clear. The diner fell silent. Blade turned slowly, his eyes finding Hannah in her corner booth. Well, look what we have here, boys. Seems like someone forgot their manners. Actually, I learned my manners in the Marine Corps. 3 tours in Afghanistan tend to teach you a thing or 2 about respect. Blade's laugh was forced, uncertainty flickering in his eyes as he took in Hannah's confident stance. Marine Corps. You expect us to believe that? Don't have to believe it, but you do need to let these people leave. You know what happens to people who get in our way? Blade growled, reaching into his cut. Actually, I do. But the real question is, do you know what happens when you threaten a force recon Marine? The mother had managed to gather her children behind Hannah, who subtly shifted her stance to provide better coverage. Betty had disappeared into the kitchen, hopefully calling the police. Hannah calculated response times in her head. 5 minutes minimum for the first patrol car to arrive. Last chance to mind your own business, lady. Protecting civilians is my business. 15 years of military service didn't end when I took off the uniform. The biker with the snake tattoo lunged forward suddenly, attempting to grab Hannah's arm. His move was telegraphed, amateur, nothing like the trained fighters she'd faced in combat. Hannah stepped smoothly aside, using his momentum to send him stumbling into a booth. Dishes rattled and silverware clattered to the floor. Blade swung his brass-knuckled fist in a wide arc, but Hannah had already anticipated the move. She ducked under his swing while simultaneously sweeping his legs out from under him. The big man crashed to the floor with a thunderous impact that shook the diner's windows. "You're going to regret this," Blade snarled, struggling to his feet. Blood trickled from a cut on his lip where he'd hit the floor. "Nobody messes with the Iron Vipers." "I've heard that kind of talk before," Hannah replied calmly, usually from people who don't understand what real combat looks like. Two more bikers moved to flank her, while the third blocked the door. Hannah remained centered, her breathing steady, hands relaxed at her sides. The training that had kept her alive through 3 tours was about to serve a different purpose, protecting innocent people in a small-town diner. "Get her," Blade roared to his remaining men. But as they moved in, they were about to learn why Force Recon Marines were considered among the military's elite fighters, and why this quiet woman in a diner was about to become an internet sensation, a community legend, and a symbol of hope for veterans everywhere. What happened next would change not just their lives, but an entire town's understanding of strength, service, and redemption. The viral video would be just the beginning of a story that would touch millions, and remind everyone that sometimes the most important battles we fight are the ones that bring people together, rather than tear them apart. As Blade and his men closed in, Hannah Dawson allowed herself a small smile. She hadn't asked for this fight, but she was about to demonstrate why you don't mess with the wrong woman at the wrong restaurant. "I said, get her," Blade shouted again, but this time there was uncertainty in his voice. The next 30 seconds would go viral on social media, racking up millions of views and changing life in their small town forever. Hannah moved with the fluid precision that only comes from years of combat training. The first biker charged in, throwing a wild haymaker that would have knocked out most opponents. But Hannah wasn't most opponents. She slipped inside his guard, redirecting his momentum with a simple shoulder turn. The big man went flying into an empty booth, crashing through it with enough force to splinter the wood. "That's one," Hannah said quietly, already moving to face the next threat. The biker with the snake tattoo pulled a knife, its blade glinting in the diner's fluorescent lights. "Not so tough now, are you?" "Actually," Hannah replied, her voice still calm. "You just made this easier," she gestured at the cell phones recording the scene. "Assault is one thing, armed assault, that's serious jail time." He hesitated for just a moment, exactly what Hannah had counted on. Her kick sent the knife spinning from his hand before he could react. A quick strike to his solar plexus followed by a sweep of his legs, and he joined his friend on the floor. "That's 2. Hannah continued, turning to face Blade and his remaining man. "What the hell are you?" Blade's voice shook slightly. "I told you, Force Recon Marine, we're trained to handle multiple armed opponents. You're making this too easy." The third biker looked at his fallen friends, then at his boss, then at Hannah. He raised his hands and backed away. "I ain't fighting no Marine," he said, heading for the door. "Smart man," Hannah nodded. "Now it's just you, Blade. We can end this here." Instead of answering, Blade charged, brass knuckles glinting. Hannah sidestepped smoothly, years of training taking over. She caught his arm, used his own momentum to spin him around, and suddenly Blade found himself face down on the diner floor, his arm locked behind him in a hold that sent waves of pain shooting through his shoulder. "Listen carefully," Hannah spoke softly, but everyone in the now silent diner could hear her words. "I could break your arm right now, easily, but I won't because that's not what Marines do. We protect people. We don't hurt them unless we have to." "Let me go," Blade growled, but the fight had gone out of his voice. "First, you're going to promise me something. You and your gang are never going to bother this diner or anyone in it again. Understand?" Blade tried to struggle, but Hannah applied slightly more pressure. He gasped in pain. Okay, I promise. Hannah released him and stepped back, staying ready just in case. But Blade just sat up, rubbing his shoulder and staring at her with a mixture of fear and something else. Respect. Your men need medical attention. Hannah pointed to the two bikers struggling to get up. There's a clinic 3 blocks from here. I suggest you take them there, then go home and think about what happened today. The sound of police sirens filled the air. Blade looked at Hannah, then at his injured friends. This isn't over, he muttered, but his heart wasn't in it. Actually, it is, Hannah replied. But how it's over, that's up to you. You can leave here tonight as the gang leader who got beaten by a woman. Or you can leave thinking about why a Marine Corps veteran would risk herself to protect strangers in a diner. Betty emerged from the kitchen, phone still in hand. Police are almost here, Hannah. You okay? Fine, Betty. How about you get these gentlemen some ice for their injuries before they leave? The mother with the children stepped forward, tears in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. I was so scared. It's okay now, Hannah assured her, keeping one eye on the bikers as they helped each other up. You're safe. As the police cars pulled into the parking lot, their lights painting the diner windows in red and blue, Hannah noticed something strange. Blade wasn't looking at her with hatred anymore. Instead, he seemed lost in thought, as if seeing something he'd never considered before. Officer Martinez was the first through the door, hand on his weapon. He took in the scene, the broken booth, the scattered dishes, the shaken but unharmed customers, and the 3 battered bikers. Everyone okay here? He asked, though his eyes were fixed on Hannah. Just a small disagreement about proper diner etiquette, Hannah replied. I think these gentlemen were just leaving. Martinez looked at the bikers then back at Hannah. Want to press charges? Hannah considered for a moment, then shook her head. No, I think everyone learned something tonight. Didn't we, Blade? The big biker met her eyes briefly, then looked away. Yeah, he mumbled. We did. As the bikers limped out of the diner, followed closely by the police, the other customers burst into applause. Hannah tried to wave it off, but Betty was already announcing that coffee was on the house for everyone. That was amazing. A teenage girl approached Hannah, phone still recording. Are you really a Marine? Was. Hannah corrected gently. Now I help other veterans adjust to civilian life. Speaking of which, she turned to look out the window where Blade was sitting on his bike, still not starting it. I think I might have found some new clients. The video would be uploaded within minutes. By morning, it would have hundreds of thousands of views. But what nobody knew yet was that this was just the beginning. The real story, the one about redemption, community, and finding purpose after combat, was about to unfold in ways nobody could have predicted. Your coffee's getting cold, Betty said, sliding into the booth across from Hannah. Thanks, Betty. Hannah picked up her cup, noticing her hand was perfectly steady. Not even a tremor. You know what's strange? That felt more important than anything I did overseas. How so? Because this time I wasn't just fighting against something. I was fighting for something. For this place. These people. Sometimes the biggest impact we can have is right here at home. Little did Hannah know just how prophetic those words would prove to be. As she sipped her coffee and watched the police cars pull away, the wheels of change were already in motion. The Iron Viper's reputation for troublemaking was about to transform into something entirely different, and Hannah Dawson's quiet life was about to become a lot more interesting. By midnight, the video had over 100,000 views. By sunrise, it was approaching 1 million. Hannah woke up to her phone buzzing non-stop with notifications, messages, and calls from news outlets across the country. Force Recon Marine takes down 5 bikers while protecting diner patrons, read one headline. Female veteran shows, true meaning of leave no one behind at local restaurant, proclaimed another. Hannah ignored them all and headed to work at the Veterans Center, hoping for a normal day. But normal wasn't in the cards anymore. Have you seen this? Maria Torres, one of her veteran clients, burst into her office waving her phone. You're everywhere. My daughter showed me the video this morning. She said you're like Captain America, but better because you're real. It's not that big a deal, Maria. Hannah tried to downplay it. Just did what anyone would do. No, Maria insisted, sitting down across from Hannah's desk. What you did was remind people that we veterans aren't broken. We're still warriors, still protectors. Do you know how many women veterans have been sharing this? You've given us a voice. Before Hannah could respond, her office phone rang. It was Betty from the diner. Hannah, honey, you need to get down here. Something's happening. Trouble? Hannah was already standing up, ready to move. No, just you should see this for yourself. When Hannah arrived at Riverside Diner 15 minutes later, she stopped short in the parking lot. The place was packed. People were actually waiting outside to get in. But what really caught her attention was the group of motorcycles parked in the corner of the lot. Not Iron Vipers, but other local motorcycle clubs. Inside, Betty rushed over to her. They've been coming all morning, she explained, gesturing to the bikers scattered throughout the diner. Different clubs from all over the area. But they're not causing trouble. They're apologizing. A large man in a leather vest stood up from his booth. His patch identified him as the president of the Road Ravens MC, Captain Dawson. He called out. Got a minute? Hannah walked over, aware that the whole diner was watching. The biker extended his hand. Name's Big Mike. I represent several of the legitimate motorcycle clubs in the area. What happened here last night? That's not what we're about. The Iron Vipers give all bikers a bad name. We wanted you to know that we're here to support this establishment and its customers. That's unexpected, Hannah replied honestly, shaking his hand. There's more, Big Mike continued. We heard you run a veterans center. A lot of our members are vets. We'd like to help. Maybe set up a motorcycle maintenance program for veterans who need transportation. Give them something positive to focus on. Before Hannah could respond, the diner's door opened again. Everyone turned to look. It was Tommy, the youngest of the Iron Vipers from last night, but he wasn't wearing his colors anymore. Captain Dawson. His voice shook slightly. Can I talk to you? Privately. Hannah nodded and led him to her usual corner booth. The young man couldn't meet her eyes at first. I was in Iraq, he finally said. Army infantry. When I came home, I couldn't fit in anywhere. The Vipers. They felt like brotherhood again, you know. But last night, watching you, you reminded me of my old sergeant. Always in control. Always protecting others. And now, Hannah asked gently. I want out. But it's not just me. Blade. He's been talking all night. What you said about being a protector instead of a threat. It hit him hard. He's got a daughter, you know. She saw the video this morning and called him, crying. Asked him why he was being a bully. Hannah sat back, processing this information. What are you asking for, Tommy? Help. Not just for me. For all of us. Most of the Vipers. We're lost. Looking for what we had in the service. That sense of purpose. You showed us there's another way to be strong. The diner had gone quiet, everyone trying to listen in. Hannah was aware of the phone still recording, of how this moment might be another turning point. The Veterans Center opens at 9, she said finally. Come by tomorrow. Bring anyone who wants to change. We'll figure something out. Tommy's eyes lit up with hope. Really? Even after what we did? Especially after what you did? Because you're proving my point. Real strength isn't about intimidation. It's about having the courage to change. As Tommy left, wiping his eyes, Big Mike approached again. "We'll help," he said simply. "Any of the Vipers who want to reform. They'll have support from the legitimate clubs." Betty appeared with coffee beaming. "On the house as always." "Betty, you can't keep giving me free coffee. Watch me." The waitress grinned. "Besides, business is booming. Look around." Hannah did look around. The diner was full of an unlikely mix. Families with children. Bikers from various clubs. Veterans who had seen the video and come to show support. Everyone was talking. Sharing stories. Building connections. Her phone buzzed again. Another news outlet wanting an interview. But this time, Hannah didn't ignore it. Maybe it was time to tell this story. Not just about one fight in a diner. But about veterans finding their way home. About redemption. About how sometimes the right kind of strength can transform enemies into allies. "Big Mike," she called out. "That offer about the motorcycle maintenance program. Let's talk details." As she pulled out a notebook and began planning. Hannah realized that what had started as a simple confrontation was becoming something much bigger. The video had gone viral not just because of the fight. But because people were hungry for this kind of story. One where conflict leads to connection. Where enemies become friends. Where protecting others matters more than proving you're tough. And this was just the beginning. The next morning, Hannah arrived at the Veterans Center early. She wasn't sure what to expect. But she wanted to be prepared. At 8:45, the first motorcycle rumbled into the parking lot. It was Blade, alone, without his iron Viper's cut. "Didn't think you'd be first," Hannah said, meeting him at the door. "Couldn't sleep," he admitted. His voice had lost its aggressive edge. "Been watching that video over and over. Seeing myself. Seeing what we become." He pulled out his phone. Showing Hannah a picture of a young girl, maybe 12 years old. "This is Amy, my daughter. She called me yesterday morning crying. Asked me when I stopped being her hero and became a bully instead." Hannah nodded, unlocking the center's door. "That must have been hard to hear. Hardest thing I've ever heard. Even harder than when her mom left, saying I'd never change." Blade followed her inside. "Thing is, watching you fight, it wasn't just about the moves. It was how you carried yourself. Controlled, purposeful. Like my drill sergeant back in basic before I got discharged. You served. Tried to. Washed out of Army basic. Medical discharge, bad knee. Felt like a failure. Started running with bikes to feel strong again." He looked around. The center, taking in the photos of veterans, the materials displayed on the classroom walls. "No idea I'd wind myself in this situation." Additional motorbikes arrived at the curbside. Tommy brought 3 additional Vipers with him. Big Mike and a few other members of Road Night arrived next. At 9 o'clock, the meeting room of the center was filled with people wearing leather vests and looking uncertain. Hannah, positioned at the forefront, observed the peculiar gathering. "Who is up for taking the lead now?" Tommy gestured with his hand. "My unit was the 2nd Infantry Division in Iraq. Everything seemed off when I returned home. Not loud enough. Too mundane. What I was lacking was provided by the Vipers. Unity, excitement, direction. Nevertheless, the objective was misguided. Then others started to do the same. 5 of the 12 Iron Vipers there were veterans who had been in the military but had not yet served their full term. 3 were the offspring of veterans who had never served in any capacity themselves. They were all on the hunt for an elusive object. In her announcement, Hannah pulled out a whiteboard and wrote down our plan. We will begin by instituting a program for the upkeep of motorbikes. There is an opportunity to teach from Big Mike and the Road Knights. We will assist veterans who are in need of transportation by repairing their bikes. Do you seek atonement? That should be your first stop. Then she continued to write on the board. Community service. Help for veterans. Rebuilding families. As a second point, we do have plans for veterans. Get the help you need, whether it's counseling or resume development. There will be a method for those who aren't veterans to show their support. Swift sprang to his feet. Kindly allow me to speak with the administration of my daughter's school. Describe what transpired to them. Make a show of it and teach them to outdo me. Okay, Hannah gave a knowing nod. I've also added that to the list. 3 hours passed during the meeting. By the conclusion, they had a strategy. After the Iron Vipers disbanded, a new entity would emerge. Veterans and their families can find support in this group, which focuses on helping one another out and repairing motorcycles. Tommy proposed a different moniker for us. Someone from the Ember Riders level yelled out. For the simple reason that we are reborn from our former selves. Something changed in the air. The once defeated guys now sat up straight, their eyes beaming with determination. Those eyes belonged to Hannah. It was something she had witnessed in innumerable soldiers who had rediscovered who they were. Hannah went back to Riverside Diner later in the day. There was more than just Betty at her regularly scheduled booth. Alongside her, she was Maria, a representative from the Veterans Center. Maria informed Hannah that she had heard about it earlier in the day. News travels quickly. Well, I think you already know the answer. That getting a cup of coffee in peace will never happen again. No, Maris chuckled. What this indicates is that we are witnessing something novel and significant. The video's virality drew all eyes to the altercation. However, the current events are the true tale. Unasked for, Betty brought coffee. She said the eatery was turning into quite the place. Everyone from families to veterans to motorcyclists is mingling. We had lunch here with other bikers from Ember. They assisted a senior couple in the parking lot who had a flat tire. Hannah's vibrating phone rang. A message had come from Blade. You are wanted by Amy. Describes her goal as following in her dad's footsteps and learning the proper way to be strong. Hannah reflected on how much had transpired in the span of 2 days as she penned her response. Although a few minutes of action were captured on the viral film, the true change was now taking place in the little moments and decisions. As Maria observed an influx of motorcyclists entering the diner's parking lot, she couldn't help but think that the Veterans Center would require a larger space. The word is spreading. Local veterans are contacting us to inquire about the possibility of launching a comparable initiative in their community. Hannah said to take it slow, but she was beaming the whole time. We should check this one out to be sure it works. She watched from the window as Tommy lowered an elderly veteran off his motorbike, showing the same reverence for the man's cane as he had for his weapon. 2 ex-Vipers were instructing the wife of a young veteran on how to check the oil on her motorcycle nearby. Do you have any idea what's truly evolving? As she slid into the booth alongside them, Betty inquired. There's more at play than merely veterans rediscovering themselves. It's important for everyone to keep in mind the true meaning of community. Concerned about Blade and his daughter, Tommy's wonderful rediscovery of his warrior spirit, and how a clash had opened the door to connection, Hannah nodded. Showing other people how to be strong can be the strongest thing you can do, she added. Standing in the parking lot of the Veterans Center, Hannah witnessed an astounding metamorphosis emerge 1 week subsequent to the tragedy at the cafe. There were motorbikes, toolboxes, and individuals working together in what was formerly vacant ground. Sure, Mrs. Chen, I'd like you to give it a go right now. From under a refurbished Harley, Tommy yelled out. The engine roared to life as the key was turned by the old veteran's widow. Joy spread across her face. The bike belonged to her late spouse and had lain unused since he died 3 years ago. Whispering through her sobs, she expressed how overjoyed Jack would be. A lifelong goal of his was for me to master riding it. 3 other Ember authors were instructing a group of young veterans in basic maintenance under the supervision of Blade, who now insisted on being named Robert. Amy, his daughter, sat close by, completing her schoolwork and occasionally raising an eyebrow in a proud manner at her father. When Robert saw Captain Dawson, he motioned for Hannah to come over. "Are you available to assist me with a pressing matter?" Under a canopy, Hannah and he built up a temporary desk, and Hannah joined him at it. Plans, sketches, and a roster of names were dispersed over it. "Then what is this? Do you recall the tale of the husband's bike that Mrs. Chen told?" Left me contemplating. I wonder how many other households of veterans also have bikes that gather dust in the garage. Recollections that are yearning to be revived. Hannah perused the inventory. I thought these were all families of local veterans. Not to mention active duty. 38 motorcycles belong to service members who have either passed away or are currently serving their country. Without charging you a dime, we intend to restore them all. Get things going so the family may enjoy them. Make sure they know how to keep them clean. Hannah thought it was ambitious, but she could see the possibilities. More is coming, Robert went on to say. Amy was the one who thought of it. While our service members are away on deployment, we would like to provide free maintenance and riding instruction to their families. Assist them and provide them with a focal point. Make it clear that they have support. Something making a racket at the doorway caught their eye. A contingent of Road Ravens members was being led in by Big Mike, with 3 additional lawful motorcycle clubs sending delegations after them. There was a plethora of equipment and tools on each bike. I heard you guys could use some assistance. Large Mike beamed with delight. In every club, you'll find our qualified mechanics. Now is the moment to utilize such abilities. After Hannah arrived, she saw the parking lot rearranged into a well-organized workshop. Vets assisting other vets. Addicts who caused difficulty in the past now instruct others in safer practices. Sharing stories of loved ones helps families heal and become closer. At her side, Maria materialized. We have local news here. The topic of Operation Ember Rising is of interest to them. Next steps for the operation. That's the idea that the students had. Amy and a few other kids were painting a banner when Maria pointed to them. The repair of motorcycles is being hailed as a way to honor the history of veterans. Quite advanced for students in middle school. That day, the news crew managed to capture something truly spectacular. Not merely individuals mending bikes, but a society finding its footing. During their chat, Mrs. Chen discussed how she and her husband were rekindling their intimacy. Amy was shown with pride as she described her father and his buddies as heroes who were now assisting the families of other heroes. The most moving part, though, was when Tommy and the Ember Riders gave a rebuilt Harley to the pregnant wife of a deployed Marine. According to what Tommy assured her, her husband's bike will be ready for when he returns home. Everything you need to know will be taught to you till then. We consider you a member of our family. The following night, Hannah went back to Riverside Diner. Weary but satisfied. Not even Betty inquired. Sitting across from her, I just brought her coffee. Just saw the news. Oh, how delightful. Betty grinned. Some dudes. Things have changed. While Amy was having lunch, Robert dropped by. Disclosingly covered the cost of a veteran's lunch. Hey there, bro. I just wanted to drop you a line and say glad to see you again. It was a nod from Hannah. It's as if they've discovered their destiny at last. The ability to aid other people, rather than control them. Betty lowered her voice as she spoke about assistance. Did you hear about last night's incident at Murphy's bar? The tension in Hannah's body amplified. Yes, but then what? Customers were harassed by a group of out-of-town motorcyclists. 6 Ember bikers arrived before the cops could react. What did they do? Served the troublemaker some coffee, took a seat with them, and had a meaningful conversation about respect and purpose. Tomorrow, 3 of those motorcyclists will be visiting your facility. Hannah loosed a belly chuckle. They are essentially training to be peacekeepers. Betty gave you the same knowing wink. Incidentally, someone has left you a gift. An envelope was given to Hannah by her. In it was a sketch made by a little boy. A figure dressed in blue like the military, standing next to a motorbike and surrounded by happy people. To Captain Dawson, in meticulous handwriting, at the bottom. My dad has been shown the way to heroism once again, and I am grateful. Warm regards, Amy Valentine. The following day, Hannah attached the artwork on the bulletin board of the Veterans Center. It became one with other representations of metamorphosis. Images depicting bikes that have been meticulously repaired. Appreciation notes from loved ones served. Articles written about the volunteer work of the Ember Riders. More significantly, though, it stood for something greater than a single diner altercation or viral video. It proved that all it takes to start a movement for good change is one person speaking out for what's right. Observing the bustling parking lot outside her office window, Hannah came to the realization that the most significant triumphs do not always conclude with capitulation, but rather with the collective assent of all parties involved. Much beyond their little hamlet, news of Operation Ember Rising's success spread. Hannah encountered a fresh obstacle 30 days subsequent to the incident at the diner. 3 other states' veterans centers were phoning to inquire about the Ember Riders program and how to launch their own. "We've got a situation," Robert declared as he walked into Hannah's office on Monday morning. He had company. A man Hannah knew from the news was there with him. Republican Senator James Harrison is a decorated Army veteran. The senator reached out to shake Captain Dawson's hand. "The Veterans Affairs Committee is interested in your program. Our goal is to make this a nationwide movement." At Hannah's signal, they should take a seat. "I didn't expect that. Does it?" The senator retrieved his mobile device. Even while the initial video has amassed over 50 million views, it was the subsequent content that truly captivated me. "You have transformed those who were once rebellious into influential members of the community. Veterans' families now have a new reason to work. You've made a functional model." Then Robert raised his voice. "From all around the nation, motorcycling groups have been contacting us. They share our desire to reform and assist veterans, but they lack the necessary structure and resources to accomplish it. That's my area of expertise." In an effort to replicate the success of your Ember Riders program across the country, Senator Harrison has introduced a measure to provide funding for veteran motorcycle repair programs. However, you must assist with the setup. On her chair, Hannah reclined. "We are a very tiny operation, Senator. This is no longer the case." Robert cut in. "Let her see Amy." Amy, who had been sketching in silence in the corner, retrieved her tablet and approached. There were dozens of illuminated points on the country map. She took great pride in explaining that each light represents a potential starting point for new chapters of Ember Riders. "It's been my job to keep tabs on the requests for Dad." The senator gave a knowing nod of approval. When it comes to veteran support services, this might be a game changer, bringing together motorcycling culture and outreach. It reaches an audience that has been difficult for us to contact before. Maria interrupted Hannah just as she was about to speak. "Please, I must interrupt you, this is something you must see." The office TV was switched on by her. From conflict to community, the Ember Riders Revolution was airing on a nationwide morning program. Interviews with families of veterans and footage of ex-gang members instructing youths in motorcycle safety were shown on the screen, along with footage from their most recent bike restoration event. According to Maria, this is now about more than simply motorcycles. There is always a way to serve and a way to redeem, and that is what it's all about. The senator rose to his feet. I will let you some time to consider it. However, keep in mind, Captain Dawson, that often the most valuable service we can provide is simply demonstrating how to serve others. Robert persisted beyond his departure. Hannah, I think we should discuss Jake. The Iron Wolves MC's commander, Jake, hails from a different county. They're just like us, or much worse. He dropped by last night to visit me. Everyone wants to change, but nobody knows what to do. A sigh escaped Hannah's lips. I am well aware of it, Robert. We require this nationwide program because our resources are already limited. While we may not be able to solve every problem, we can teach others to do so. Beaming from the doorway, they were abruptly taken aback. Tommy appeared to be rather enthralled. This is going to shock you. Do you recall the group of troublesome youths that were compelled by the court to participate in our community service program? The ones you've been instructing in the fundamentals of upkeep? What do you think? Hannah queried. Yeah. Regardless, the probation officer recently contacted them. They have all been on time for every single check-in since they began working with us. 3 of them are back in the classroom. A couple of them found part-time work. Our program is supposedly more effective than the old-fashioned intervention methods. As Hannah beheld the map on Amy's iPad, she saw the many glowing dots that stood for villages that had reached out for assistance. She pondered the stories of troubled youths finding redemption, veteran families reuniting through bikes, and Jake and his Iron Wolves. In the end, she spoke to Robert. Ring Jake's number. If he is in charge, have him come here tomorrow. What about Amy? Affirmative, Captain Dawson. Do you think you could lend me a hand in getting ready to meet with the senator? Proving the program's viability on a nationwide level will be our top priority. Amy was very pleased. Taken care of. Together with my dad, I have been creating many kinds of flowcharts. At that very moment, Betty came back from the cafe with some news and coffee. You have no idea who showed up at Riverside just now. 3 former Iron Vipers who departed town prior to the onset of this whole mess. They returned from Texas after viewing the morning show. Someone is standing by to speak with you. As Hannah surveyed her office, she couldn't help but notice Robert, her former adversary and current ally at Amy, whose father's metamorphosis had ignited a desire in her to one day help others. Looking at Tommy, who had now reconciled himself with his true identity. She promised to be there in an hour and told them so. As for Betty, additional coffee will be necessary. It seems like something much larger than we could have ever dreamed is going to make Riverside Diner its command center. Robert took a framed photo off Hannah's desk as Betty departed. It was the famous still from the video that went viral, showing the moment when she stepped forward to shield a terrified family. Although you brought us low that night, you ultimately raised us up and revealed our potential, he remarked with some contemplation. Hannah shot back, that's the thing about real strength, as she observed Amy perfect her presentation. It has the power to change lives, not merely win battles. Nothing like this had ever been seen at the Riverside Convention Center before. At the inaugural National Ember Riders Summit, 300 motorcyclists from around the nation joined forces with veterans, social workers, and directors of family support programs. As a last step, Hannah stepped backstage to review her notes. Feeling anxious? Then Robert, clad in a brand new leather vest bearing the Ember Riders insignia, a rising ember encircling a motorbike wheel with the word strength through service beneath, appeared next to her. Hannah said that it was not about talking. Learn more about what's coming up, next. Here come Jake's Iron Wolves. The Florida Coast Riders and Arizona Desert Raiders are the same way. Any and all groups who were once considered outlaws are now trying to adapt. With a nod, Robert was satisfied. We did it again. I am concerned about that. Ex-enemies are going to learn cooperation from us. Worst case scenario, long ago disagreements flare up again. And Robert grinned. Take a look. He showed Hannah a group chat on his phone. Motorbike safety class commencements from all around the nation, images of rebuilt bikes, and stories from veterans' families filled the screen. They are already collaborating. When you're dedicated to helping other people, old grudges don't matter as much. Senate President Harrison rose to the platform. Here we are, ladies and gentlemen, welcoming the trailblazer. Hannah Dawson, the captain. The cheers were deafening. Hannah stepped out and took it all in. Amy took a seat in the front row beside a bunch of other youngsters. They were all wearing Junior Ember Riders t-shirts that they had created themselves. They were all the offspring of gang members. Sitting close to their former adversaries, Jake and the Iron Wolves were discussing veteran outreach programs behind them. Hannah started 2 months ago. It was the moral thing to do, so I got up in a diner. This is something I was not anticipating when that moment occurred. However, something extraordinary catches my eye as I survey this space. People who were formerly foes are now my allies. From tumultuous histories, I perceive bright futures. Behind her, on the screen, images started to scroll past, and she motioned for them to stop. Over 200 motorcycles owned by veterans have been refurbished in just 8 weeks by Ember Riders chapters. 83 veterans in need have been given transportation. For 47 troubled youths, our youth mentorship program has been a lifeline. Photos of motorcycle clubs both before and after were shown on the following slides. Motorcycles, however, are not the object of the most crucial rehabilitation effort. People are experiencing it. Teams who were once bitter rivals are now collaborating. People are now safe from men who used to be a danger to them. The doors of the conference center sprang wide in an instant. Strolled in a gang of motorcyclists wearing strange colors. Hannah kept talking despite the uncomfortable atmosphere in the room. Just like our new Carolina Ravens friends. They heard about what we're doing and rode all night to be here. Greetings, men. There's no delay in informing you about Phase 2. Just as fast as it had come, the stress was gone. Those surrounding them were welcoming of the newcomers as they took seats. The second phase isn't limited to bikes alone. Hannah kept going. Building a network of support across the country is the focus. Each Ember Riders chapter will have a designated partner that serves veterans. We fix more than just motorbikes. Restoring purpose, reuniting families, and rebuilding lives are our top priorities. Tommy rolled out a tarp-covered motorcycle in response to her signal. When Marine Sergeant David Chen passed away, his widow could not bear to touch this bike, which belonged to him. Not only is the bike fixed up now, but Mrs. Chen is also one of our riding teachers for military spouses, all because of our program. Wearing her very own Ember Riders vest, Mrs. Chen herself emerged to resounding cheers. As she started the immaculately refurbished motorbike, the old lady grinned. The engine is working like new again. We stand for this. Amidst the cheers, Hannah spoke up. Keeping the memory of our heroes alive via helping others is more important than simply commemorating their sacrifice. Expansion, training, and community integration plans were outlined in the following section of the presentation. Nonetheless, the most impactful part of the question and answer session occurred when a young Carolina Ravens motorcyclist sprang to his feet. I must admit something. He seemed nervous. None of us rode all night only to be there. Our original plan was to have a territory war with another club yesterday, so that's why we showed up. However, we were shown the footage of the events that transpired at that diner and subsequent events. We dismounted and rode here instead of carrying weapons. We are eager to discover ways to improve. Robert nodded as Hannah glanced at him. Here you are at the correct spot. Her response was succinct. Just because we all share a common history here. Your history is not something that we are here to evaluate. Let us be a part of your future construction. Afterwards, the summit's breakout sessions were conducted by seasoned Ember authors. Problem solving was Robert's specialty. Youth mentorship was the topic of Tommy's session. Connecting with military families was something Mrs. Chen talked about. As the sun dipped below the horizon that night, a motley crew from all over the nation gathered in the parking lot of the convention center. Hannah and Betty stood there, taking it all in. "Is this what you were expecting when you stood up to those bikers?" My question was posed by Betty, providing Hannah with her trusty cup of coffee. Yes, Hannah did confess. However, that is the issue with being moral. The potential impact is always uncertain. Amy hurried up with sensational news at that very moment. The Carolina Ravens have recently volunteered their clubhouse to serve as a new hub for veteran assistance, Captain Dawson. In addition to that, 3 more clubs are following suit. Reconciling over shared meals, anecdotes, and plans for a future based on service rather than animosity, Hannah couldn't help but grin. As it rose, the ember's wings stretched farther than she had ever dreamed possible. Unexpectedly, the crisis occurred. The 2 a.m. light on Hannah's phone came 3 months after the national conference. Jake, the former leader of the Iron Wolves, has called with an emergency message. "We're in a jam, my friend. Serious problem. Do you recall our warnings about those outlaw clubs? The ones who simply would not budge. They're getting ready to strike." Up in bed, Hannah was immediately vigilant. Which specific maneuver? The chapters of Ember Riders are their objective. Last night, 3 of our bike repair centers were vandalized. Traders like us are being accused of being too lenient. Even yet, it's far from the worst aspect. Tell me what it is. They are endangering the families of veterans who we assist. Notified Mrs. Chen via left messages. Hannah was frightened. Each and every one of us is. Hannah transformed the Veteran Center into a command post in less than an hour. Tommy and Robert worked together with chapters of the Ember Riders in 6 different states. More and more reports arrived. Even more damage. Further dangers. Each one focusing on a different kind of community service. They want us to go back to our previous methods of doing things. Robert snarled. Adding yet another event to their radar. Need to show that, at our core, we're still thugs. Later on, we disproved their claims. Hannah gave a forceful response. Arrange for a video call with each chapter leader. Right now. As the room's screens illuminated with worried expressions from all around the nation, Hannah witnessed the power of their creation. In order to safeguard their joint creation, former adversaries banded together. Please pay attention. With the commanding presence she had in her Marine days, Hannah spoke with conviction. Our preparation has been tailored to this very test. They anticipate violent retaliation from us. In order to show that they were correct about us. Our plan is to demonstrate to them the true values held by the Ember Riders instead. The plan was laid out by her. There would be heightened security at all restoration centers, but they would all stay open. Protected around the clock, not by weaponry but by the unwavering presence of Ember Riders members performing their duties, veteran families would feel safe. Creating a sense of belonging. Damage was done to Mrs. Chen's residence. Hannah kept going. I envisioned 50 bikes in her driveway first thing in the morning, with riders mending her fence, landscaping her yard, and instructing the kids in the area on how to properly maintain their motorcycles. Display to them that we counteract devastation with 2 times the amount of production for every act of damage. Tomasz raised his voice. Our program's problematic youths are terrified. They are being pressured by some of their former gang associates to pick a side. Then we provide them with an improved option, Hannah retorted. Prematurely launch Operation Legacy. Have the youngsters volunteer with veteran families so they can learn a trade and earn a Ember Rider vest. Anything out of the ordinary occurred the following day. 100 members of the community formed a non-violent line outside the Restoration Center when the aggressive bikers arrived to threaten an Ohio Ember Riders chapter. Wearing Ember Riders support shirts are veterans, families, repentant bikers, and local business owners. After attempting to intimidate a veteran's widow in Florida, the Ember Riders discovered that her garage had become a community center, where some fixed bikes for wounded veterans and others taught motorcycle safety to children in the neighborhood. However, things started to change at Riverside Diner. Frantically, Betty dialed Hannah's number. A gang of criminal motorcyclists had shown up seeking trouble. Robert was already there when Hannah got there. Seated among the aggressive motorcyclists, he showed them photos of his daughter Amy mentoring younger riders. "Think we back down?" As Robert was explaining. "Listen, I'll explain what true strength is. Last week, I had the honor of assisting a Marine widow in getting her husband's bike started again after he passed away in Afghanistan. Observed as she showed their youngster the same way his dad did it, by checking the oil. That was the most courageous thing I've ever done." Standing in the doorway, Hannah observed the outlaw bikers intently listening. Their looks shifting from disdain to interest. An older man with new tattoos from prison was one of those who raised his voice. "And what about fraternity, though? Belonging to anyone? Peruse your surroundings." Hannah took the lead. "Here we have genuine fraternity. Riding here tonight to defend this cafe, Ember motorcyclists from 20 states promised to do so. Keeping quiet. Providing assistance. To demonstrate the true meaning of loyalty. More arrived within the following few hours. Rather than fight the bandits, we should point them in a new direction." Some of Tommy's teen ments showed off their impressive mechanical abilities. Mrs. Chen brought cookies and recounted how the Ember Riders had assisted her in moving on from her grief. 3 of the outlaw motorcyclists had surrendered before midnight and were inquiring about joining the Ember Riders organization. As soon as it was light outside, their whole chapter gathered in Hannah's office to complete volunteer paperwork for the Veteran Support Center. Would you like to know what swayed them to reconsider? It was only afterwards that Robert informed Hannah. Fear of our numbers wasn't the factor. Seeing the good that we do wasn't even a factor. It came down to the possibility of being a part of a greater whole. A spark had been lit by the catastrophe. As a result of the targeted chapters increased the scope of their community programs during the next week. A new restoration project was launched in response to each incident of vandalism. In response to any danger, they extended an offer to become part of their cause. I was mistaken. In the midst of a last-minute leadership meeting, Jake informed Hannah. Adding more darkness isn't the answer to fighting darkness. It's via illuminating a path so clear that they can't help but notice it. The sunrise over the Veteran Center, guarded by a tranquil vigil of Ember Riders and community members, reminded Hannah that the best wins aren't often won by vanquishing your adversaries, but by proving to them that they were never truly foes in the first place. According to the newscaster, an astonishing event took place on the National Mall in Washington today. The Restoration Rally is no ordinary motorcycle event. Almost 10,000 bikes, spearheaded by Ember motorcyclists and Captain Hannah Dawson, gathered for it. While being encircled by the initial gang that had begun it all, Hannah watched the coverage from Riverside Diner. From above, the television displayed aerial pictures of motorbikes organized in a gigantic Ember shape. According to the reporter, the program has grown from its humble beginnings as an argument in a small-town cafe into a model for veteran assistance programs nationwide. Military officials and peace activists alike have praised the Ember Riders for their reaction to recent threats on their organization. As their corner booth became more and more full, Betty summoned everyone to turn up the volume and brought more coffee. Locals and Ember Riders members alike flocked to the diner to witness its humble beginnings. From the steps of the Capitol, Senator Harrison delivered a speech, as shown on the screen. The Ember Riders model is a game-changer and it comes to helping veterans and transforming communities. Federal financing for initiatives like these will be made possible thanks to the Veterans Restoration and Community Integration Act, which I am pleased to announce today has bipartisan support. Amy, who had recently become a junior Ember Rider and was wearing a vest decorated with community service merit badges, was jumping up and down in her seat with excitement. Rest assured, Dad, your speech will be shown next. Unsurprisingly, the camera panned to Robert at the platform on the National Mall, completely transformed from the menacing gang boss he'd been a few short months earlier. We used to believe that being strong meant that people should be afraid of us, he was stating. Using your power to raise people up is the true meaning of strength, as Captain Dawson taught us. Restoring bikes, helping veterans, and mentoring kids is more than simply giving back to the community, it's a demonstration of fighting spirit. Upon seeing Tommy demonstrating their youth mentorship program, the diners burst into applause. Working side by side with veterans, troubled youths learn valuable skills and discover purpose in their job. The reporter went on to say that the Ember Bikers' response to the recent threats against their organization was really impressive. They decided against revenge and instead expanded their community programs, converting possible adversaries into friends. An alert from Jake sounded on Hannah's phone. Can you make out this? Just received word. Calls for meetings extended to 3 additional unlawful clubs. Knowledge of the Ember program is of interest to them. Speaking up was Maria, who had been sitting quietly next to Hannah, taking notes. The thing that's truly remarkable is, I just got the numbers. Communities with Ember Rider chapters and the risk of suicide among veterans have both decreased by 23% since the crisis. People's lives are being saved by us. The spotlight moved to Mrs. Chen, who was interviewed in her garage, which had been transformed into a community center. She spoke while rubbing her eyes, explaining that these individuals did more than mend her husband's motorcycle. Thanks to them, I was able to channel my grief into service to others. Spouses and widows of service members are my current students. Together, we recover. Former gang clubhouses are now veteran support centers, according to a new section. Reformed members who had bullied veterans are now working side by side with them, according to the reporter. Take a look. Tommy showed Hannah a social media trend on his phone. The hashtag Ember Effect became viral as individuals shared accounts of the program's positive impact on their neighborhoods. The capital of the country has just contacted. Robert chimed in. The establishment of Ember Rider chapters has been associated with a decline in gang activity, according to police departments across. They're aiming for the beneficial influence of one's peers. It was all taken in by Hannah. All eyes were on the packed diner as news reports and messages poured in from all over the nation. Remembering that night, she had bravely stood up to shield a terrified family, little knowing the path it would go. Do you know what's amusing? When Betty came over to sit with them, she finally took a break. How we transform these riders is a topic that keeps coming up in conversation. We simply showed them what they were capable of if someone had faith in them, but that's all. When it came to faith, Betty smiled. Rest until you witnessed the impending event. A party Hannah hadn't anticipated entered the restaurant as soon as the door swung wide. She is being directed by her former CO in her former military reconnaissance unit. Members from every major national veterans organization escorted them. Dawson, her former commanding officer, grinned. We should discuss expanding the Ember program internationally. I learned that there are veterans and disturbed bikers in other countries as well. Hannah came to the realization that her first stand against bullying had grown into something much stronger as the cafe was filled with more people, their experiences, and their ambitions for the future. An uplifted movement revealed that the most powerful agents of change aren't those who bring down established systems, but rather those that empower individuals. Betty stopped by Hannah's chair after bringing more coffee for everyone. I remember when you first came here, my darling, you were attempting to escape your life as a warrior. Rather, you exemplified the true spirit of a warrior for all of us. Hannah observed as Amy educated a group of visiting children on the importance of motorcycling safety, while their parents, longtime club rivals, reminisced and plotted new community service initiatives. The most difficult fights, she said, are often the ones that lead to peace. The changeover to expanding internationally started in the most unforeseen manner. During Hannah's video conference with a California chapter of the Ember Riders, an odd request arrived from the British Royal Marines. Robert, using the main screen of the Veterans Center to pull up emails, stated that they're calling it Operation Global Ember. Not only that, but military units from 12 other countries are interested in modifying our program. Tell me what it is. Despite Hannah's suspicion that she was anticipating the answer, she nonetheless asked. Clubs for motorcyclists, and not only in the United States anymore. The European Union, Asia, and Australia are among the regions sending us requests. What happened here is obvious to everyone. The initial case study originated in Japan. After witnessing the Ember Riders story go viral on social media, a group of former Bosazoku riders, members of Japanese motorcycle gangs, reached out. They want to collaborate with nearby veterans and help their clubs evolve into community service groups. However, what if we want to modify our model to fit other cultures? During the planning meeting, Tommy pondered. In Tokyo, what may work in a small town in the United States may not. Hannah pondered the matter for a brief interval. After that, we'll let them demonstrate the proper operation. The framework is provided by us. Built in their own unique style. Hannah was chatting online with Kenji, a community activist and former Bosazoku leader, in a matter of weeks. Together with veterans of the Japanese Self-Defense Force, his group had begun restoring motorcycles while also honoring and serving the traditional Japanese ideals. Here at Rising Sun Riders, we go by that name. Kenji used an interpreter to explain. We learned how to stay brotherly even as we sought a higher calling from your Ember story. The new versions were interesting. Heritage riders were formed in Britain by rehabilitating vintage motorcycles and assisting veterans of the Royal Marines in their readjustment to civilian life. The group was founded by former members of illicit bike clubs. When it came to treating post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, the program in Australia included extensive rides across the outback. Hannah informed Betty of these developments over their regular coffee at the Riverside Diner. Check this out. Betty was shown her tablet by her. Global photo galleries appeared on the screen. The German motorcyclists are assisting with the restoration of a monument honoring warriors. Motorcycle safety classes are being organized by Brazilian riders for the kids of favelas. Chapters in South Korea assisting military families along the Demilitarized Zone, DMZ. In Betty's mind, it's like witnessing the propagation of light. The spirit remains the same, but the details vary from place to country. A computerized map illustrating the program's worldwide reach was being created by the person who had become the unofficial chronicler of the Ember movement. A proud woman emphasized that each dot represented a unique tale. However, they are all interrelated. A peacekeeping representative from the United Nations called them, and that was the turning point. As a novel approach to assisting ex-combatants in their readjustment to civilian life, he proposed using the Ember Riders concept in areas devastated by war. During a conference call, he emphasized the need to consider it. Why not use the same techniques to help areas rebuilding from conflict become community leaders if you can do it with opposing biker gangs? Hannah discovered that her staff was becoming more and more diversified. Cultural adaptation training was overseen by Maria. Robert worked in tandem with motorcycling organizations across the world. Tommy came up with youth programs that were adaptable to many cultures. The defining moment occurred in Geneva at the inaugural International Summit of Ember Riders. Hundreds of countries worth of ex-rivals recounted their metamorphosis. They showcased their seasoned outreach tactics with the help of a former French gang member and a British ex-rocker. The Australian chapters were instructed by their Japanese Rising Sun riders how to incorporate meditation into their curriculum. Senator Harrison informed Hannah during their observation of the summit that she had developed something truly remarkable. Veterans are now seeing this as more than simply assistance, it's a model for resolving conflicts through collaboration. Perhaps no one had a better grasp on it than Mrs. Chen, though. An audience of people from all across the world had asked her to share her story. I felt I had lost everything when my husband passed away, she informed the assembled gathering. The Ember bikers did more than simply fix up his bike. They taught me how to find meaning in my sorrow. The same thing is occurring all throughout the globe now. Individuals channeling their suffering into a force for good in the world. The movement's growth continued in surprising ways. Using motorcycle restoration as a means of healing old wounds, former paramilitary members in Ireland worked together through the program. In South Africa, the initiative united war veterans from opposing factions. Hannah observed something extraordinary one night while watching video feeds from Ember programs throughout the globe. No matter where you were, Tokyo, London, Rio de Janeiro, or Berlin, the exact same thing happened. Volunteering their time to teach youth, assist veterans, and establish community despite their history of animosity toward one another. Do you realize the feeling this evokes in me? Robert said as he watched the opening chapter in Lebanon unfold on screen. That night at the diner, when you demonstrated an alternate form of strength. Hannah argued that this was unique. Currently, they are demonstrating to one another. Chapters build upon one another by taking what they can from earlier ones and then adding their own insights to pass on. The final say went to Betty, who was seldom far from her coffee pot. The true impact of this event may lie in that. Giving people the means to demonstrate a better approach rather than merely demonstrating it to them. Hannah beheld the world map of Ember Writers' chapters, with each dot symbolizing the innumerable lives transformed. Standing up to bullies in a cafe is just one example of how she learned that even the simplest actions may have far-reaching consequences. With a message that was both simple and profound, the Ember had actually awoken and was now spreading its wings around the globe. Transformative power, not dominance, is the essence of real strength. And it just takes one individual to fight for justice for the world to see significant change. Newly passed by the UN General Assembly is a historic resolution. In an official announcement, the news anchor acknowledged the Ember Writers Initiative as a paradigm for fostering global peace and providing assistance to veterans. Unexpectedly, Hannah was in the White House Rose Garden when she saw the program. While she and Robert and Tommy awaited their meeting with the President's task team on veteran matters, she was accompanied by officials from Ember authors' chapters around the world. According to Betty, she is still in disbelief that all of this began with an argument at her diner. She insisted on bringing her coffee pot because she had been invited to witness this historic moment. Wow, you're the one who's influencing foreign policy now. The rate of change was outpacing everyone's expectations. Policymakers dubbed it the Ember model, and it was being modified for use in a variety of social initiatives across the globe. In order to address bullying, schools were implementing modified versions. Its ideals for community outreach were being put into practice by police departments. Standing with a tablet in his hand, Senior Advisor Captain Dawson made his way over. The UN. We need to have a conversation about the program's implementation in peacekeeping operations, Secretary General. Furthermore, your veteran support structure is serving as the basis for laws being drafted by the European Union. Just as Hannah was about to reply, an urgent message from Kenji in Japan rang her phone. A dispute between opposing motorcycle organizations in Osaka that had lasted for decades had recently been settled by the Riders of the Rising Sun. Is this the answer? Creating a shared resource for veterans by merging their rival workshops. As Robert showed Hannah his own phone, he made the observation that it's no longer only about bikes. Take a look. Reformed gang members in Cape Town are launching youth entrepreneurial initiatives based on our concept. They're referring to it as Ember Rising Professional Advisors. With each passing day, the effect became more apparent. Communities that hosted active Ember chapters saw a decline in crime. The suicide rate among veterans has been falling. Nonetheless, the most important thing was that communities were getting better in ways nobody had anticipated. Do you recall the troublesome teen program that we launched? Tommy inquired. The data was recently made public by the Education Department. Graduate rate among those who took part, 92%. The initiative has reportedly achieved the greatest success rate of any intervention in the nation. The Ember Riders Youth Leadership Council, which Amy now heads, had news of her own. Next month, we will be debuting in 50 additional schools. Instead of joining gangs, kids in Ember are starting groups. Sure, they are learning how to fix motorcycles. Community, leadership, and service are additional topics they cover. In his remarks that day, the president recognized something extraordinary. We learned from the Ember Riders that increased enforcement isn't the answer to many of society's ills. More people are involved. Helping others is a powerful kind of self-expression, and when we show people how to do it, they take it. At Riverside Diner later that night, Hannah reunited with an oddball collection of policy specialists from all over the globe who were curious about the program's impact. According to a sociologist from Norway, the most impressive thing is how the model can be applied to diverse cultures while retaining its fundamental ideas. The biggest youth mentorship program in Oslo is currently administered by ex-criminal motorcycle groups. In the favelas of Rio de Janeiro, an ex-gang member who joined the Ember Riders is now more successful in reducing crime than the police, according to a Brazilian community organizer. Since they are a part of it, they have a good grasp of the neighborhood. As additional anecdotes came in, Hannah listened intently. Ember chapters in Northern Ireland were helping to heal long-simmering sectarian tensions. The Ember Riders were mediating between the Israelis and the Palestinians, establishing safe havens where they could collaborate. The question then becomes how to keep it from deforming as it matures. I was asked by a policy advisor, "What can you do to keep it from being disoriented?" Hannah grinned and gestured towards the window of the eatery. As a diverse group of parents, including veterans, ex-gang members, and community leaders, sipped coffee and chatted, Robert was outside instructing a group of youngsters in the fundamentals of motorcycle maintenance. She elaborated by saying that it is not based on rules or regulations. The foundation is based on change. Each individual who makes a change demonstrates the program's efficacy. The integrity of it is entrusted to them. After remaining silently taking notes, Maria finally spoke up. "Check out the numbers. The same pattern emerges in every country where our chapters are founded. Crime rates decline initially. The involvement of veterans in support groups then rises. At last, participation in community activities increases among all age groups." In her role as coffee cup refiller, Betty likened it as a positive infection. Everyone wants in on the action once they see it in action. This humble eatery had become the epicenter of a worldwide movement, and the policy gurus couldn't get enough of it. Witnessing the program's seamless integration into the community, they diligently recorded interactions between ordinary customers and Ember Riders members. Do you know the truly groundbreaking aspect of this? It was noted by a Canadian lawmaker. Rather than viewing veterans as helpless victims, it is more effective to view them as warriors in search of meaning in their service. Amy walked a group of student representatives from around the world through the new peer mentorship program, and Hannah watched as she did it. Once terrified of her father's motorcycle culture, the teen is now a community organizer and mentor. At long last, Hannah spoke up, "The government isn't where the real policy change is taking place. All throughout the globe, in garages, diners, and community centers, it's taking place right now. We are not merely amending statutes. We are influencing people's attitudes." With the evening coming to a close, Betty brought out one more pot of coffee for all. Because of the unexpectedly strong sense of community and camaraderie they experienced at this unexpected birthplace of global change, the policy specialists had long since set down their notebooks. What is missing from all those policy documents, though? As she sat down next to them, Betty inquired. A little bravery can sometimes pave the way for a great leap forward. Having a single, courageous individual willing to lead the way can be all that's needed at times. The latest obstacle that the Ember Riders have to overcome came from an unexpected source. Detroit chapter members found a homeless veteran residing beneath a bridge. Everyone saw his story. That was due to his character, not his circumstances. We have Colonel James right here. Hannah informed the Veterans Center's emergency leadership meeting. One Afghan community was spared by 3 former members of the Special Forces who were awarded the Silver Star. He was unable to adapt to civilian life and is now homeless. Robert emphasized that we must take action. This has expanded beyond a single veteran. A hole in our program has been revealed by this. A hard reality had been revealed by the colonel's predicament. Despite their achievements, they failed to assist some of the most defenseless veterans. Those who had slipped through every loop and were unable to attend a Ember Riders or Veterans Center gathering. According to Tommy, who was using the main screen to access blueprints, he had an idea. We have a bunch of these converted clubhouses. Could we convert them into temporary homes instead? Not merely beds, but complete rehabilitation facilities. The plans were studied by Hannah. More than mechanics and mentors would be required. Doctors, therapists, and instructors for the workforce would be necessary. Maria stepped in with a stack of papers and interrupting while already on it. Do you remember all those successful people who became members of the Ember Riders? Doctors, therapists, and social workers are all available and eager to lend a hand. Members of the Ember Riders and other trained volunteers created a program they dubbed Ember Nests, which provided a safe haven for troubled veterans. All of them would have housing, vocational education, mental health services, and, most crucially, a sense of community already incorporated. But look at these garage areas and these plans, Robert said, and you'll see the true ingenuity. A functional motorbike repair shop will be available in every Ember Nest. Helping other veterans while gaining vocational skills is an opportunity for residents. Not only are they getting assistance, they are also contributing to its provision. Colonel Wright was a resident and program advisor at the original Ember Nest, which was in Detroit. He was especially suited to assist in the design of the support system due to his military experience and personal hardship. Do you know the most challenging aspect? Hannah was informed by the colonel during the opening ceremony. It wasn't that I was homeless, it was that I felt worthless. With this curriculum, we have found our calling again. Ember Nests were popping up all over the nation in a matter of months. Each one evolved into something more than a simple haven. Veterans could go to these transformation centers to help others get back on their feet while they got back on theirs. A surprising obstacle, however, quickly arose for the program. The Ember Riders came under fire from a well-known lawmaker who said the group was doing more harm than good by providing services to homeless veterans. On national television, Hannah was defending the program. We are empowering, not enabling. Upon entering our facility, every veteran contributes to the resolution. Not only are they getting assistance, but they are also learning to help others. Unexpectedly, the conversation ignited something. In an effort to learn how they could apply the Ember Riders' approach to their own communities, members of other oppressed groups started contacting them. According to Tommy, we have a group of ex-gang members who are interested in starting Ember Nests for troubled youngsters. Those who have overcome substance abuse wish to help others do the same. As if one were to observe the subsequent evolution. At the diner one night, Betty watched as she served coffee to a diverse collection of people, including residents and volunteers from Ember Nest. First, you assisted motorcyclists in becoming volunteers in their communities. You are now guiding everyone to their place of service. There was no denying the effect. It wasn't simply about getting off the streets for the people of Ember Nest. A new generation of community leaders was emerging. Police departments began to receive veteran outreach training from Colonel Wright. Entrepreneurship, youth mentorship, and program administration were among the activities pursued by other alumni. Interested in hearing the true tale of success? Maria showed Hannah the most recent numbers and requested. Graduates of Ember Nest are now serving their communities at an even higher rate than before, 87%. By making other people's lives better, they're not merely getting by, they're thriving. Program changes persisted. Veterans with families, members of the LGBTQ+ community, and female veterans now have access to specific support services through Ember Nests. New solutions, based on the same premise, were developed in response to each new issue they faced. Personal growth via volunteer work. Do you recall the day when we believed this had nothing to do with repairing motorbikes? As Robert observed the Ember Nest members instructing a group of homeless youths in motorcycle repair, he couldn't help but laugh. Hannah said it was never the case. The motorbikes merely served as a link. Fixing people by demonstrating that they could aid in the healing of others has always been the central focus. As the sun dipped below the horizon at the newest Ember Nest facility, Hannah noticed a newcomer, a young veteran who appeared bewildered and wounded, much like Colonel Wright. Veterans who had been through what he had were there to welcome him, rather than social workers. When Colonel Wright extended his hand to welcome his brother home, he was preparing him to join a cause greater than himself. As the young veteran surveyed the bustling workshop, he saw that residents and volunteers were working side by side, with everyone pitching in to help. As he nodded, his shoulders slightly straightened. Hannah informed Betty later at the diner that is truly what we are constructing here. Home not only for shattered birds, but also for fledgling embers. As Betty watched from the window, members of Ember Riders helped take another homeless veteran to safety, and a grin spread across her face. The courage of a single lady to confront bullies in a cafe has inspired a global movement that supports those who have been oppressed. That is the epitome of overcoming adversity, in my opinion. Nobody anticipated that motorcyclists would be among the first to respond to the earthquake in Mexico City. However, chapters of the Ember Riders from all across the Americas were already organizing within a few hours. In an urgent video conference, Robert announced that hundreds of motorcycles were prepared to be moved. The Ember chapters in Panama and Texas are merging. Bigger cars can't get into those spots, but they can. Hannah tracked the hundreds of dots making their way toward Mexico City on the operations map. It was a representation of an Ember Rider, and they were all prepared to lend a hand. Many of them were veterans with disaster response experience. Tommy joined in, saying that this was the point of their training as they worked with chapters around the world. You may recall that we began practicing emergency response drills. It's going to be worth it. Something extraordinary was revealed in the initial photos taken in Mexico City. Motorcyclists in the Ember area are forming columns to transport water, medical supplies, and other emergency equipment while they navigate debris-filled streets. People who had been victims of gang violence were now putting themselves in harm's way to protect others. Maria said, "Look at this," gesturing toward her computer screen. Japanese riders of the Rising Sun had sent out their specialist rescue squads, drawing on their knowledge of earthquakes from their own history. The local transformation was the most effective, although veteran troops of the Royal Marines and British Heritage Riders were working together to set up emergency communications. Formerly feuding Mexican motorcycle groups were now collaborating under the Ember flag, and their intimate familiarity with the area's streets and neighborhoods was crucial. Other disaster zones are requesting our assistance. Hannah informed the rescue squad. The Philippines was hit by a hurricane, Bangladesh by floods, and Australia by wildfires. No one is satisfied unless they know whether this response model can be repeated. I don't see why not. Robert inquired. We now have chapters all across the globe, and they are all prepared to respond to emergencies. The operation in Mexico City served as a model. Ember Riders evolved into a distinct kind of emergency response team, one that was adaptable, quick on their feet, and well connected to the neighborhoods they served. Because of their community connections and motorbike expertise, they were able to identify the areas most in need of assistance, whereas bigger organizations were unable to. Betty continued to serve coffee at the Riverside Diner as Hannah collaborated with teams from around the world. The walls of the diner were now covered in maps and emergency response plans, turning it into an unofficial command center. Just heard from Kenji, Tommy said as he dashed in. A new program for emergency response training is being developed by Rising Sun Riders. They are eager to share their earthquake rescue tactics with other chapters. As she studied the reports from Mexico City, Hannah nodded. This was more than just a supply run. By the Ember Riders. Communities' responses to disasters were being revolutionized by them. Collaborators included ex-enemies. Once hated by neighborhoods, gang members became heroes to the community, and motorcycle clubs became their best allies. A representative from FEMA, Captain Dawson, used the video link. We should have a meeting to discuss how to incorporate the Ember response model into our current procedures. Are you doing something? That's groundbreaking. However, an unforeseen source provided the actual breakthrough. In Mexico City, a former cartel member addressed a local chapter after witnessing the Ember Riders' impact on his town. We have bikes, he remarked. These streets are already familiar to us. Rather of doing harm, show us how to assist. In a matter of weeks, such requests began to pour in from conflict zones all around the globe. Some of the groups that contributed to the issue before now wished to help fix it. In presenting Hannah with the most recent statistics, Maria noted that it is growing at a rate we never expected. More and more, Ember chapters are stepping up to the plate in times of crisis, whether natural or man-made. How communities now react to Ember Riders is a clear indication of the transition. People who used to be afraid of motorcyclists now welcome them with open arms, knowing that they are there to help. Do you recall the day when it was a huge issue to confront bullies in a diner? Gazing at the Ember Riders as they loaded supplies for their next mission, Betty inquired. Yes, it was, Hannah said. In the face of larger bullies, disasters, poverty, and despair, it is exactly what we continue to do, just on a grander scale. An impromptu celebration marked the end of the Mexico City operation. The bikers from Ember were awarded with the highest civilian distinction by municipal officials. For Hannah, the most moving part was seeing how members of different gangs rode together under the Ember emblem, putting aside their animosity and focusing on the common goal of helping others. What you've showed us is crucial. During the ceremony, the mayor of Mexico City made the statement that the very spirit that was a source of terror might now be a source of heroism. Hannah came to the realization that they had accomplished something truly remarkable as she observed the Ember Riders from dozens of countries together. A worldwide fast response force formed from the very demographic that society formerly saw as a threat. Did you notice the true shift? Standing next to her, Robert inquired. Instead of perceiving ourselves as contributing to the disorder, we began to perceive ourselves as contributing to its resolution. Former rivals reuniting to restore homes in Mexico City were shown on the evening news as Ember Riders, with the insignia of the rising ember, worked side by side. Ember, however, now stood for more than just individual metamorphosis. It stood for the capacity to change despair into optimism, animosity into unity, and danger into safety. Hannah assured her worldwide response team that the next time they responded, they would be even more prepared, since that is how Embers operate. In addition to rising from the ashes, they assist others in doing the same. A representative from the UN peacekeeping mission made the contact. Two opposing groups in a battle zone halfway across the globe had asked for something never done before. Their peace negotiations were to be mediated by Ember Riders. They witnessed our dealings with competing gangs and biker groups. The same ideas, Hannah informed her leadership team, are now being considered for use in actual combat. Tommy made it clear that they are not diplomats. Robert concluded by saying that we are simply individuals who have mastered the art of transforming adversaries into champions. Who knows? Maybe it's just what they require. This occurred in an area where ethnic strife had raged for decades. While responding to the Mexico City tragedy, members of both factions had seen footage of the Ember Riders uniting rival bike gangs. Their message was that maybe you could help us find a road to peace if you could convince the angry bikers to cooperate. There she stood, in front of the heads of both camps, in a United Nations conference chamber. Accompanying her were Robert, Tommy, and representatives from member chapters across the globe, all of whom brought unique insights into the process of transformation. Hannah warned that we shouldn't start until you meet someone. She then pointed to a screen on which Mrs. Chen's remarks from the Riverside Diner were displayed. What she has to say about true strength will shock you. In her anecdote, Mrs. Chen reminisced. A story of sorrow, recovery, purpose, and the power of kindness. Hannah noticed a change in expression on the leaders' faces as she spoke. Allow me to show you something else, Hannah went on to say. She showed clips of gang members who had been enemies before banding together in times of need, forming an unlikely alliance via mutual aid. Robert added, drawing from personal experience, that you feel strong when you have your weapons. We also felt powerful because of our bikes and the colors we wore. True strength, however, is derived from serving others and refraining from harming them. When Tommy proposed a revolutionary concept, everything clicked into place. First, let's get down to business and settle this once and for all. Rebuilding your communities is a top priority. We'll begin with that. What came next was completely new. Ember Riders helped bring together people who had previously been foes and got them to work together on community improvement projects. Rival groups discovered they could work together to repair bikes, and so did warring groups when it came to repairing hospitals and schools. Maria informed the UN observers that it is the Ember concept. Problems amongst individuals take a back seat when the group's mission is to help others. As news broke from the war zone, Betty at Riverside Diner continued to play the news. She exclaimed with pride as she beheld her former adversaries uniting behind the Ember banner. Although it took some time, the change was significant. Giving individuals the message that they may be strong by assisting others instead of controlling them was crucial, just like it was with the motorbike clubs. This is about more than just peace talks, a UN official informed Hannah. You're constructing it from the very beginning. Because of the success, other war zones took notice. Northern Ireland, the Balkans, and Central Africa were among the regions from which requests began to pour in. Transfiguration like the Ember was something everyone was interested in learning. However, what's the best way to grow this? During a late-night strategy session at the diner, Hannah pondered aloud. In the same manner that we handled the bicycles, Robert clarified. We instruct them to instruct others. What they came up with was referred to the Ember Peace Teams. Communities comprised of people from different backgrounds who have come together and learned to work together. These individuals are now mentoring others to do the same. An unexpected delegation, including former members of bike gangs in Japan and Korea who are now working together to promote peace in their region, was brought by Kenji of the Rising Sun Riders, and their arrival was the most powerful moment. According to Kenji, our animosity lasted over many generations. We are now demonstrating to our communities how to put aside long-held animosities. As Hannah observed, the model continued to manifest in other conflicts around the globe. From their humble beginnings in a restaurant in a tiny town, the Ember Riders had grown into an international organization dedicated to helping veterans and responding to disasters. Now, they were taking their mission to build peace. The intriguing thing that a specialist in conflict resolution noticed is the practical benefits of motorcycling culture. Brotherhood and loyalty were concepts that these individuals were already familiar with. You just assisted them in turning it into a constructive direction. As Hannah observed the Ember Peace Teams at work in another war zone one evening, Betty dropped by with her regular coffee and a query. When you defied the bullies in here, did you ever believe you'd influence global conflict theory? Hannah surveyed the diner, which had been adorned with photographs documenting Ember's global operations, disaster responses, veteran support programs, and, most recently, peace initiatives. What have I discovered? Her response was succinct. From a cafe brawl to a battlefield, the rules remain the same. Make a stronger person more approachable. Make a difference in people's lives by giving them an opportunity to serve others. More and more Ember Peace Teams were being sent out to different locations, each one delivering the message that had begun in this humble cafe, according to the news. Real power does not reside in dominance but in protecting and serving others. Robert, who was watching the coverage, commented that we're doing more than just riding motorcycles anymore. We're taking a glimmer of optimism to places that have long since forgotten itself. There was more to the Ember Riders than just a movement now. A symbol of hope that knew no bounds, they had become that. Embracing their idea of strength through service, communities across the world demonstrated that change may be sparked by the unlikeliest of individuals. Hannah was one of 4 people, Robert, Kenji, Maria, and Colonel Wright, who stood at the UN General Assembly. There were world-renowned dignitaries, veterans, and community leaders in the assembly hall. A montage depicting the Ember Riders' work, repairing bikes, reconstructing towns devastated by disasters, and negotiating peace in war-torn regions, played on the big screen behind them. Today, we honor the Ember Riders for their remarkable achievements and the innumerable lives they have inspired, as stated by the Secretary General. They taught us that investing in people, despite societal fears, leads to positive transformation that benefits everyone. Hannah approached the platform. With the same unwavering confidence that once rendered a gang boss speechless in a cafe in a tiny town, her voice exuded a tranquil strength. I naively believed I was merely defending a family when I initially got up at Riverside Diner. That one incident would blossom into a movement that would bring people together regardless of their background, religion, or country was beyond my wildest imagination. The fact is that we can all make a difference if we want to. The first step is often the most basic, doing the right thing. She waited for her remarks to sink in before continuing. The Ember Riders are about more than simply veterans and motorbikes. Metamorphosis is the theme. Their message is that anyone can get back up after falling, and they encourage others to do the same. Hannah still had more to accomplish, though, before the crowd broke out in cheers. Education systems, disaster relief initiatives, and reconciliation programs have all incorporated elements from her Ember concept, which she shared with world leaders in her meetings. Like a flame that had been kindled in that cafe all those years ago, each new chapter held the same energy. At Riverside Diner, everything were almost back to normal. A bunch of proud local Ember bikers gathered around Betty as she poured them coffee. Every active chapter was marked with a pin on a world map, and each pin stood for thousands of lives changed. Open notebook in hand, Hannah sat in her customary booth. Amy, who now works on the design for the next Ember Riders Summit, was working across from her. The summit is now held annually. This year, what is the theme? What do you think? Hannah queried. Amy smiled and stood up with her. A new pot of coffee was brought over by Betty. Honey, I can't stop having people ask me whether I ever imagined my modest diner would spark a worldwide movement. Can you tell them something? Hannah inquired with a smile on her face. The world, I remind them, always begins with a little thing, a cafe, some coffee, and one courageous soul who musters the will to rise up. Hannah observed, through the window, the arrival of a fresh contingent of riders, a mix of youth and experience, who were all donning the identical symbol of the ascending ember. Handshakes, giggles, and the distinct buzz of community welcomed them. The sun's waning rays mirrored in the windows of the eatery as they cast their last shadows over the sleepy village. As the Ember Riders of the future got ready to continue the tradition, Hannah put her notepad away. Betty, she said as she lifted her cup, to rise with me. With a smile as radiant as the ember emblem on Hannah's jacket, Betty reflected the sentiment of rising together. The myth of the Ember Riders persisted, serving as an inspiration not only for their metamorphosis but also as a reminder of the strength that comes from supporting one another and showing that no matter how low we fall, we can always find a way to climb back up.
Disclaimer. This channel stands against all forms of intolerance, discrimination, racism, and violations of human rights. The stories shared here are original creations, developed to encourage reflection, understanding, and constructive dialogue. All content is produced with a commitment to respecting diversity and honoring human dignity.